everyone, good to see you again. For those of you that are visiting for the first time, welcome to my channel. I appreciate you stopping by. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing, comment, like, share. If you have any topics or content you want me to upload, please drop it in the comments below or message me. All my social media contacts are also in the description. So in this next video, we're going to be looking at supplemental feeding for our dogs, and this is a ration that I prepare, and these are excerpts from my Holistic Pet Care educational program. So I hope you enjoy it, and again, thanks for stopping by. Hey everybody, welcome to my kitchen, and today I'm going to be preparing a recipe for dogs. And the recipe that I'm going to be preparing today is a supplemental diet. And what this particular recipe is good for is for people who feed dry food, or maybe they give their dogs processed food, a canned diet, kibble, etc. This is a good way to increase the amount of natural food into their diet without breaking the bank. And let's face it, we all have to be a little conscious of our spending at times, so this is a really inexpensive way to incorporate fresh food into our dog's diet. So let's take a look. So I purchased a few items at the local supermarket. Now, if you have other sources where you can get your food from that will provide even more cost savings, that would be great. But for the purpose of this particular recipe, I just went down to the local supermarket and I picked up a couple of pounds of beef, a pound of pork, I have some broccoli florets, some spinach, and of course, good old-fashioned eggs. So we're going to mix all this stuff together. I'll explain it as I go. And you'd be surprised how simple this is. And I made a few notes. 2 pounds of beef cost me $10. A pound of pork, $3. Broccoli, $3. Spinach, $3. And then eggs, of course. So, very inexpensive way to get some really good, natural, fresh food into our dog's diet, which will obviously contribute to their overall health and well-being. And it's really simple. I mean, I have everything here. You can see the beef and the pork. I mean, this is fresh. You'll see a little parsley sprinkled on top. Some people will suggest adding a little parsley, that it aids in digestion. I think I do it just because I'm Italian, and we put parsley on everything. And it looks pretty too. And we're just going to mix this all together. I have a really big mixing bowl, and we're going to put all of this together. We'll start with the beef. We sprinkle that in there. I'm going to add the pork. Now, you could feed pork raw if you know the source of the pork is a good, safe source of your pork. But for this particular recipe, we're going to be sauteing this anyway, so it really doesn't matter. I'm not all that concerned with bacteria in my pet's food, but when it comes to pork, I tend to saute it anyway, just to be on the safe side. So now that we have our meat in our big mixing bowl, I am going to mix this up just a little bit before I start adding the other ingredients. And you know, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to get our hands in here in a little while anyway and really mix this up well. So I just mix that in there nice. And I'm going to start off with some spinach, and I kind of eyeball this, and incidentally, there's tons of recipes on the internet. This is just one that I happen to use, that I'm comfortable with, and that my dogs happen to thrive on. And for the spinach, I use a food processor, and I pretty much use about 1/3 of a standard cereal bowl. That's kind of my eyeball. Let me just scoop that in there. And spinach is a good source of vitamin A and vitamin C. And then we have our broccoli florets, and this I use probably about 3/4 of a cereal bowl, maybe a little more than half. There we go. And I can't really say that I use the vegetation for nutritional needs primarily, because the meat and the eggs that I'm going to put in here, that's really where the dogs are going to derive most of their amino acids from. And nutrition at its core is all about amino acids. I mean, that's really where the nutrient absorption that takes place in the small intestines, it's all derived from the amino acids from the food. And muscle meat and organ meat, those are the best sources of amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. And if you notice, speaking of organ meat, I don't have any organ meat in this particular ration, and the reason being is I am formulating a supplemental diet right now. If I wanted to make this a more complete and balanced diet, I would add up to 20% of organ meat into this mix as well. And again, we're just going to mix this in here. There we go. And then next up is our eggs. I got 3 eggs, basically an egg per pound. That's my little concoction. And I wouldn't worry so much about cracking this egg open. I'll tell you why, because we're adding the whole egg, shell and all. I missed. And we're going to crush this up, shell and all. And the eggshell will provide a good source of calcium. Keep in mind, we're using a lot of muscle meat. We have 3 pounds of meat here in total. So the eggshell will act as a little bit of a calcium supplement as well. And I am going to add supplements to this diet. There we go. Just put the egg in there. Now, some people prefer to use a bone meal supplement, or they like to puree the eggshells to make it a little more finer. So you can crush the eggshells manually, you can put it in a food processor, whatever works for you. So that's pretty much the base of our ration. Very simple, and it didn't take me very long to prepare as I was setting up before shooting this video. Now, some people prefer to add cottage cheese or yogurt or other food stuff to their ration for a variety of purposes, like yogurt for acidophilus. I prefer to actually just add the acidophilus with digestive enzymes in a powder, and I just sprinkle this in here liberally. We're not going to overdose our dogs on good bacteria, nor are we going to overdose our dogs on digestive enzymes, especially because we're going to be cooking this ration. So some of this will be denatured in the cooking. But what this is going to do is it's going to help aid in digestion. And again, we mix up a little bit. Now here is my calcium supplement. Again, some people prefer to use bone meal. I purchased this particular calcium trace mineral supplement because it's intended specifically for these types of purposes, where we're creating and formulating our own recipe with primarily muscle meat. This is going to fill in the gaps to make sure that we have the right calcium to phosphorus ratio. Now keep in mind, muscle meat alone has about a phosphorus to calcium ratio of 20 to 1. Dogs and cats require, ballpark, a calcium to phosphorus ratio of about 1.3 to 1. And some will argue that cats is dead even at 1 to 1. Nevertheless, having muscle meat alone and that phosphorus to calcium ratio of 20 to 1 is far too imbalanced, even for a supplemental diet. So I will use this calcium trace mineral supplement. And again, I sprinkle this right on. And now, there are measurements here depending on how much meat you're using, but I've been doing this so long that I just kind of eyeball it and ballpark it. And we're going to mix that together like that. So let's take a quick look at all the items that I used so far during this segment. So I mixed it up pretty well, and I got my hands in there real nitty gritty, and I ground it up and mushed it around real well so it mixes as evenly as possible. And I also made a patty out of it. Some people prefer to make a patty out of their ration, and they will cook this or feed raw and divide it up accordingly. I actually cook the whole ration into kind of like a ground meat, as if you would see in a taco. Because I'm using this supplementally, when it's ground up, it's easier to mix in with their dry food or whatever other ration that I'm giving them on that particular day. So that's how I choose to do it. Some people prefer the burger form, and that's fine as well. So let's take a closer look. As you can see, it's very simple to prepare and it looks basically like a meatloaf. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to saute this up, brown the meat a little bit, and how I'm going to do that is I'm going to put a little olive oil and a little bit of coconut oil in a frying pan and I'm going to saute it up. I use coconut oil often in our dog's ration, usually as a food topper. Very high in lauric and caprylic acid, so it helps fight yeast or candida. So for any of you out there that have dogs with chronic ear issues, adding coconut oil to their diet is a huge plus. Now obviously, like any oil, you can't add too much too soon, but for the purpose of this particular ration, we're using it merely as a coating for the pan when we saute our meat. So I'm going to go whip this up and I'll show you the end result in a few minutes. So the meat is sauteing now, and I use a pot. It's just easier to stir up the ration. When I use my large saucepan, I tend to spill stuff over the side when I'm mixing it up. So I just use this just as a convenience. And again, all we're doing is browning the meat a little bit just to cook it slightly to add as a supplement to the dog's diet. And here's our finished product, just browned slightly. There's a little bit of pink here and there, but for the most part it's browned over. It's very simple, and again, that was about 3 pounds of meat, and the spinach, the broccoli florets, a couple of supplements, a few eggs, and you're good to go. And I use this again as a supplemental diet, and in this particular case I have some dry food here, and I literally will just take a few scoops out and mix it right in over the dry food. I mean, and the dogs, they just love it. They go crazy for it, even when it's cold. Sometimes I take it right out of the fridge and I give it to them cold, and they don't care. They just love it the same. And it's just a great way, again, to get some natural food into their diet without breaking the bank. What do you think, Bettis? You want to give it a shot? Are you waiting for me to release you? Stay. Let's take a look. Okay. That a boy. Good job. Good boy. And there you have it. It was a big hit. But he's used to this anyway, so he knows what's going on when he's getting that fresh food in his bowl. And this particular ration, you know, we have 2 Shih Tzus and 4 Pit Bulls that we're using this for. So this particular ration will probably last about 5 or 6 days, depending on how much fresh food we add into the diet. And that's really the key component to supplemental feeding is, you know, to make sure that you balance out the food that you're preparing to mix in with, say, dry food. You have to make sure that you pull back on the dry food a little bit. We don't want our dogs getting overweight, especially in the summer months. As the weather heats up, our dogs, their calorie needs, they reduce naturally. That's why many dogs often will gain weight in the summertime as opposed to the winter time. So just keep that in mind when you are feeding supplementally, that whatever you add, you have to be cognizant that you have to remove some of their dry food as well.